Good morning, fish keepers. Cam here from the fishroom.co.nz. We've done it. We've made it to Friday. Let's do coffee. That's not too bad. First time I've had this coffee. I think I'll have it again. That's not bad at all. Before we even got started, Chris is already making me laugh. Thank you for being here. Much appreciated. We do have ourselves a special guest, so we'll bring them on. We've got John and Kapil.
How you doing?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, gentlemen.
How's it going? Nice to
Very
meet
good.
you, Kapil.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening as well. We go for time zones.
I know.
Yeah, it's
Global.
Every time we do this, it blows my mind that we've got all sorts of people from different parts of the world, different time zones. That's the bit that confuses me the most, trying to make sure the time zones all line up when I'm asking people. But yeah, we're all in different parts of the world, and we're still just being brought together for the love of fish and water and aquariums and stuff like that. So I think that's kind of cool.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so what got you involved in fish keeping and aquariums and fish and that sort of stuff?
Well, I got started from a young age. My parents are originally from India, and my father started keeping aquariums when he was in India as a child. And so when I was about 3 years old, so they migrated to the U.S. So when I was about 3 years old, my father joined the Southwest Michigan Aquarium Society. And I grew up going to these meetings, and we had quite a range of incredible hobbyists that kept all different types of fish. So from a young age, I was really exposed to, everything from cichlids to livebearers to killies and everything in between. And that really piqued my interest in keeping fish. And from a young age, I've kept a huge variety of fish. And so, by the time right before I'd gone to college, I probably had somewhere around 40 aquariums going in my fish room. We had an indoor pond. We had big outdoor ponds. And that sort of encouraged me to kind of go into science and, work on studying fish.
Fantastic. Because you're an ichthyologist, aren't you?
Yes, I'm trained as an ichthyologist. Yeah, so
cool. So for the people that don't know what that is or what that sort of entails, can you explain that a little bit, please?
Well, ichthyologist is a scientist that studies fish. In particularly, I study sort of the conservation as well as the ecology of fish. As well as I've done some stuff with aquaculture as well of marine fish. So I'm all about fish.
Fantastic, cool. If you see me smiling and giggling a little bit, it appears that Big Z is having a bit of fun in the chat at the moment. I'm not sure if you can see it.
Let's see.
I'll bring his latest comments up.
Oh, the mad aquarist.
Yeah. I see he's having a little bit of fun in the chat, so I'm just giggling away as he goes.
Those Canadians,
Yeah, very much so. Cool. Can you tell us about your most recent trip to the Amazon and how that went?
Yeah, so there's an organization called Project Piaba. Mm-hmm. It's an organization that was started by Professor Chow in Manaus, and currently Scott Dowd, the former curator of freshwater fish at the New England Aquarium, is now the director of it. And so they work with aquarium collection fisheries in the Rio Negro region. Mm-hmm. And the aquarium collection there started in the 50s with the discovery of the cardinal tetra. And it is a very sustainable fishery. And what this sort of encourages, and it's kind of a weird paradigm for people to think about, that the collection of natural resource or of a species can actually be to its benefits and to be the benefit of its ecosystem. And I like to put it out there, it's not the collection of the species that's bad, but it's really how it's done. And so these local aquarium collectors really have a good understanding of the environment. And in order for some of these fish to be in numbers in which they can be fished, and the environment needs to be pristine. So this encourages, these aquarium collectors is what we call the guardians of the forest. And this project has been one that I initially learned about, I think, from my fish club for a presentation Mike Shadle had given about his trip to Project Piaba, and I had sort of learned about it as I got older, and so it was exciting to actually go onto this trip and see where the fishery is, and see the ecosystems. And so every year, Project Piaba does a boat tour up the Rio Negro. It starts out in Manaus and it goes up as far as we can go. We're on river time, so there's a plan, but there's, various things that the environment situation sort of, changes our plans. The captain, Mr. Junior, is fantastic. The food is great. The staff is great. And I've done many trips to the Amazon, but this is probably one of my most favorite trips, not just in terms of the boat that we were on, but it was just the Rio Negro is just such a exciting and just such an interesting ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
What do you find makes it so exciting and such a beautiful ecosystem?
Well, I think the hydrology, the fact that it is this black water ecosystem, makes it unique. I think anytime you see a black water system, no matter where it's in the world, it's just a very unique system. In some of these areas that we were snorkeling, the water pH was, around 4, sometimes less than 4.
Wow.
It's tannins. In one area that I went to, the tannins were so red, it was kind of like bloody in a sense. It wasn't, but so it's pretty incredible. And since a child, I have seen cardinal tetras. I've kept cardinal tetras, and I've swam with discus, swam with freshwater stingrays. I've swam with seahorses, swam with a variety of fish around the world. But I think seeing the cardinals in the wild is probably it's just mesmerizing. If you didn't like cardinals before, I think you'll like them after you swim with them, and it's just a unique habitat, and it's almost unreal. Another reason I do like it is at least where we went through on the river, the habitats seem to be more or less pristine than other places I have been to on the Amazon. So
when you say habitats, are you talking about the aquatic habitats or people living along?
When you look at habitats in any sort of a floodplain, but especially in any of these Amazonian floodplains, whether it's the Tapajos River, the Rio Negro, the Amazon, is the habitat for fish changes laterally. So we have a flood pulse where the water rises and a lot of feet in many cases, a lot of meters. And so the forest becomes flooded. It becomes inundated with water. And so in the Amazon, it's called the Várzea forest. In Blackwater region, it's called the Igapo forest. And basically, these forests are just a unique habitat to the fish. So when you look at the habitat, the terrestrial habitat during the dry season is also important fish nursery and breeding habitat during the wet season. So you have to sort of look at it in both terms, because without one being good, if you just have water there, it's going to change the hydrology, it's going to change everything, and it's going to be less desirable for fish.
Mm-hmm.
You've mentioned pristine environment a couple times now. What makes the environment so pristine?
I didn't see as much human alteration there.
Right. Yep.
That was, I think, the big thing. Previously, I had done some work in the lower Amazon near Santarém, and it's a different environment. It's a lot more productive, and it's incredible to see how many people are living in that environment. Cattle ranching, whether it's cows or water buffalo, is a lot more prevalent there. And that can shift the habitats. And even there's a lot of communities that are more or less in the food fisheries and the aquarium fisheries, but are working at managing their habitat the best that they can. So these people can be a very big tool at the protection as well. But I didn't see as many people there.
Mm-hmm.
When you mentioned cardinals a bit earlier, you were saying how sustainable they are for being harvested or collected for the aquarium trade. Can you just go into a little bit more detail on that for people that are unaware how their spawning works, how their migration, how all that kind of the whole process works for the aquarium trade from what you know?
So so within these systems, we talked about a flood pulse. So as waters start rising, that's when your cardinals start spawning, and they scatter eggs. And so they're scattering lots of eggs, and the cardinals' way of success as a species is to make as many babies as possible. And so during the height of the water season, there's a lot more habitat, there's a lot more space for fish, and there's a lot more cardinals. But as the water levels recede, a majority of the cardinals that were born don't make it to the next year. And so usually as water levels are receding and there's concentrations of these cardinals, that is what the fisher or the aquarium collectors are harvesting. So during the dry season, during the wet season, there's very little harvest of these animals. And there's a sort of a sweet spot because when it's in the peak dry season, it's more difficult to get to some of these habitats. So there isn't as much cardinal fishing that is going on there. So it is a seasonal fishery. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the cardinals that are being wild collected are probably fish that probably wouldn't have survived. And, from the studies that I remember reading, it's been a little bit of time, but the aquarium collectors are almost collecting a very small portion of those.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the sense of a small proportion of those, how many you kind of estimate get harvested and how many don't? Does that kind of make sense?
I don't know the exact number, so I'm not going to exactly comment on what that is, but it's a very small percentage of what could potentially be harvested.
Cool. Okay, cool. So what inspired you to explore the Amazon region?
So it's actually started when I was a kid, and I remember watching with my father a documentary, which I think starred Michael Goulding, who's a well-known geographer and aquatic biologist, and they actually showed the Rio Negro and showed some of the aquarium collections there, and that I think inspired me a lot on South American fish. But I mean, I'm an equal opportunity fish lover. I love fish from all over the world. You come to my fish room, there's fish from, all parts of the world. So, but I think that's first what sort of sparked my interest in that.
Sorry, what did you just refer to yourself as? A what fish lover?
Equal opportunity fish lover.
Equal opportunity fish. I like that. I like that a lot.
I mean, if it has gills and swims, you could probably get me interested in keeping it.
Yeah, I like that. That's a nice way of putting it. I think I'm going to try and remember that and start pushing that around from places. And full credit to you for that one. How do you prepare yourself for a journey like this going into the Amazon?
How do you prepare yourself for this? So, well, the Project Piaba journey is really easy because a lot of things are taken care of for you.
Okay.
But you want to make sure that you're bringing plenty of sunscreen. What's really cool about the Rio Negro is the water is so acidic that you don't have as many insects there versus sailing on the Amazon where the insects go crazy. and you have mosquitoes like crazy, flies like crazy. And you got to remember the Amazon has a lot of energy and a lot of nutrients in there. There's a lot more fish in the Amazon, a lot more bugs, and that's why there's a lot more people there. It can sustain more. And so the Rio Negro doesn't really have that. So it's nice to just kind of sit on deck at night and not have to worry about mosquitoes. Not that they're not there, but they're in much lower concentrations. Flies, bugs, all that stuff. You'll see very few of them. And then, but you still want to bring that along because there's times that you have that. Sunscreen's important. It doesn't matter how much melanin you have in your skin. You need sunscreen. That sun will pierce through. Good sunscreen. As much water resistant as you can. I like having a wet bag there. Cameras, if you like taking pictures. I mean, I have my phone and 2 other cameras with me at all times, so I'm constantly taking pictures. I would say boots. Rubber boots are very important because there are times this journey where you are allowed to go into the forest, and so having those boots really helps. A lot of people don't understand, but with your clothes, you would like. I prefer. I think it's polyester shirts, and nylon shirts and polyester pants. I think it is basically something that can quick dry because it's a rainforest. It will rain and it will dry. You're on water, your river. Also, cotton ends up smelling a lot worse when you're in these hot, humid environments. So, sunglasses I think are really important there. Getting your vaccines, diarrhea meds. I mean, that's an important thing because you are exposed to a lot more bacteria in your gut flora. So sometimes that can have an effect. But overall, a lot of it's taken care of for you. Snorkel is also really important if you want to see the fish.
Do you have to fire away, John?
Yeah. So what about when you're out on the trips? How do you navigate the food situation? So a lot of people have mentioned in the chat, obviously some of it in jest, but it's a known fact that when you're out on the Amazon, it's quite common to eat pleco for food. Have you tried that yourself? And how did you?
I tried pleco before many times. I didn't have. So the actual pleco cooked, I've had that on previous trips. It tastes actually very good. It is bony. But it is a tasty fish. One thing that they do in Brazil is they actually will harvest the pleco meat and they'll cook it and turn it into this flour, and then they'll make them into little balls and deep fry them, and those are good as well. I had those on this trip, but with the food situation, at least with the Piaba trip, the boat company is a professional company that deals with people on a weekly basis internationally. So they have food options for vegetarians. If you don't eat fish, there's options for that. There's plenty of fish because you're in a fish-rich zone. Lots of vegetables and some amazing sweets. So
good.
Do you? Just back to the preparation, do you have to mentally prepare yourself for this sort of journey, or is it just full excitement, full noise, let's get it done?
I think that depends on the individual. I've been on multiple other journeys that I would want to say were a little bit more difficult than this one. So I would say, if you haven't traveled before, I think that might get people, but, just go with the flow and get ready for some adventure. That's really what I like to tell people.
It sounds a little bit like the Project Piaba one is almost like I don't want to say a tourist expedition, but a little bit more structured and under sort of control. They know where they're going, how they're doing it all the way through. Does that kind of make more sense as opposed to more of a wild adventure?
So the boat crew knows the river really well.
Yeah.
The Piaba crew knows the situation very well. And so some of it too is, you get on the boat and you find out there's, 3 or 4 or half the boat is bird lovers as well. And so, they'll do bird watching. We go on little night expeditions and look for various things. I think the coolest thing I saw on a night expedition was probably one of the biggest mata turtles I've ever seen. And if you don't know what a mata turtle is, it's this turtle that literally looks like you take all the leaf litter and make it into a turtle. Basically, it looks like a pile of leaves.
Cool.
We got really close to it. I mean, it literally stared me in the eyes. I think it was a big female. It was about 30 inches. I'm not sure how much centimeters that is, but it was about 30 inches in shell diameter. So it was just incredible to see. I mean, I got a little bit of flack for not catching it, but I'm not going to lie, I wasn't going to touch it. So
cool.
I like
you mentioned like bird lovers on this trip as well, and prior to us going live, you showed me your birds, so you're obviously interested in them as well. Do you want to have a quick conversation about birds, apparently just for bigs?
For bigs.
Yeah.
Well, Chris loves his birds, probably the most exciting bird I saw were macaws. I saw blue and gold macaws. I saw scarlet macaws. Again, it's another creature that, you see often, whether it's in a pet shop or a zoo or a friend's home, but to see that they actually occur in nature and see how they live, that's really incredible. Another bird that I really like are kingfishers. I think 3 species of kingfishers there, from a little tiny guy to a lot bigger ones. That was a really cool bird to see. A lot of water birds there. You'll see the occasional, and even in the middle of the jungle, you'll see an occasional domesticated Muscovy duck, which is like the favorite duck of people that sort of live in that Amazon region. They seem to do really well in the humidity. They're really ugly ducks. They're kind of mean, but they taste really good, is what I've heard. I've never eaten one, but I'm certain Chris Biggs has. So.
Sorry, excuse me. We've had a question from one of our viewers. When the rain falls, is it always pretty much the same temperature, or does that fluctuate?
It does get a little cooler when the rain does fall.
Yeah.
Not always. And when I say cooler, I assume that Scotland and New Zealand, I don't know about New Zealand, but Scotland is kind of cooler.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely cooler than New Zealand.
Okay. Yeah. So it's still hot. It's still hot. The humidity spikes a little bit. That kind of adds another dimension to it. I personally like the heat. This boat does have air conditioning on it, which is kind of cool, I guess, or not cool. The one thing I will tell you is the air conditioning will make you sweat more in the jungle. So if you just, turn off the air conditioning or keep it low, you'll be a little bit better acclimated by the end of the trip to that really hot weather, and you won't sweat as less, but I don't think many people followed that rule, including me. So
what was the most surprising thing you discovered during your trip?
Most surprising thing I discovered. So I got to swim with what we call the Hystrix ray. The population of Rio Negro has been described as Petamatrygon walsii, and it's a smaller freshwater stingray species. And I think the biggest surprising thing is the habitat that we found some of these guys in, that I swam with them. It was, I wouldn't say some areas were a little bit more rapid, but, it was really fast flowing. There was a lot of rock and woody debris in there. And, you would see some of these things in between rocks, kind of like they were cichlids, and it's just not what you expected. Every time you think stingray, I always think sand bottom and no 3-dimensional structures. And that was really cool to see. And even in one of those areas, we saw like something that was like a Matoro type that was probably around 30 inches, if not bigger, in diameter. It was huge.
Wow.
So that was probably the most, I think, amazing thing that I wasn't expecting to see.
Cool. Can you describe the area where you found the diamond piranha?
The diamond piranha. Okay, the black diamond, or the rhombius, Cerassamus rhombius. It's one of the largest piranhas. That was actually kind of in between. So when you have these rivers, you have sort of these kind of these bay or these pond areas or lake areas, lake system areas there. It ranges depending on the rivers that you are in South America. So we were kind of parked over there within these lakes. You have streams that come to them. So we had kind of parked the boat there because we were going to go into the lake and up a stream. And it was actually that one in particular, I think, was caught by a 10-year-old boy or 11-year-old boy that was on the trip, and he caught it by hook and line.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
So just the one that was discovered, or was there?
Oh, there were several. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So when you say lake, I'm sort of envisioning you're driving through the jungle, and it's just this big body of water that kind of turns up, and it's being then filled from hills and mountains coming down, but it doesn't go anywhere else. It's kind of like landlocked per se. It doesn't flow further out to anything else, or do they?
It flows into the Rio Negro.
Yeah. Okay.
It flows in the Rio Negro. You know, you have a network of these streams and channels that collected, and a lot of these lakes are kind of like oxbow lakes. You know, at one point, maybe the river flowed that direction. You know, the rivers are always changing direction and winding.
Mm-hmm.
I think another cool moment is we did a beach party at a sandbar. It was just this giant sandbar in the middle of the Rio Negro. It was amazing. The sand was just white, pure. Surrounding it was forests. One of the biologists on the trip, he's originally from Colombia, but I didn't realize this. He grew up in a very musical family, and he's a harpist. So he brought his harp along, and he started singing and playing harp for us, which was absolutely stunning. You know, they set everything up, and then, you know, they were pulling nets in the water, and we caught some Geophagus wine milleri there that were just incredible to see. A fish I really enjoy keeping and love, and so it was really incredible to see those, and just the variety of other fish that we caught on that sandbar.
Cool. You mentioned the very, very tannin-stained water, and you've mentioned white sand. In a lot of research I've done, Googling your pictures, all that kind of stuff to play around with blackwater aquariums, it seems to be a very common thing that the really tannin-rich, really low pH water has got white sand. Is that quite a common thing, or is it just a few areas are like that?
Within the Rio Negro, it seems that white sand is kind of everywhere. Sometimes it is a little coarser. There are areas that we did go to that had more clayish bottoms there. I know I've been in the Rio Tapajas and Rio Arapiumas, which are both, you know, your darker water rivers, and both of those had sand. But I have been into areas of the Amazon where the water is murky brown and it is sandy. We went up the Rio Branco, and there was sort of a mix there of sand and mud and detritus. So it varies. I think a lot of us have this idea of what a South American biotope looks like when you go to an aquarium or a zoo, but it's actually really diverse. You know, I've been to so many different places and seen so many different habitats, and there's a lot of habitats that I haven't seen that I would like to go back and check out.
Cool. We've had a question from Sandy. I believe this one might be slightly more personalized towards you. She says she loved the pink-toed tarantula at the beach party. Did Mo get her down from the palm tree?
So Mo, who's also junior or captain, his family owns a hotel in Nova Arao. I'm butchering that name, which is a little city that's just up Manaus. It's a 2-hour drive from Manaus, and it's known as Hotel Tarantula, and there's a lot of pink-toed tarantulas there. And so he did not get any on the tree from us, but we did feed it. We did feed some of them some grasshoppers and got to see them eat that.
Cool. Rebecca has just also asked a question. Did you manage to see the discus of the Rio Negro? What kind of habitat did they inhabit if you did? And did you find it different from the other location of the genus is found? Localities the genus is found.
So we did not, I unfortunately did not get to swim with any discus in the wild. I really was hoping to. I did see some at exporters. What I can say is I don't really know if how much different it is from the other places I have got to swim and see discus be collected. But based on the river, it does seem that it was different than other places I have gone. But unfortunately, when we went this time, the river was at a record low water level, so it's difficult to get places. So
Right. That's a shame.
Back to the diamond piranha. Were you specifically out there to try and seek them and to try and find them? Or were they just kind of stumbled across them, so to speak?
I think the captain knew that's where there were a good place to find them. And I think the 10-year-old boy that was on the trip with us really wanted to fish one out. So,
yeah.
It was, and other people did on the trip get to go. You can, if you want to go fishing, they have all the fishing equipment on the boat. So you don't have to bring any fishing equipment. And you just have to buy a fishing license to go on the trip. Fishing with
so did anybody get in the water with the piranha and swim with them, or was it more?
I mean, piranha are everywhere, so I'm certain that there were piranha somewhere where we swim. Yes, there's a couple of the streams that we swam with. There were some cool types of piranhas there, but usually in the past I swam in water where there was high concentrated black piranhas, and they're not an aggressive fish. They're actually an omnivore. They're more of a scavenger than anything else. They eat fruit in the wet season. They act similar to tetras, just with big teeth that you can see, but most tetras have a cool variety of teeth.
Yeah.
Cool. What sort of distinguishes them from other different species of piranhas? Are they a very similar type of thing? You just said they're not overly aggressive. How do they sort of work in comparison to them?
They are bigger. They can get, they're anywhere between 12 to 24 inches long, depending on the location. Their colors can actually range in these blackwater rivers. They're very black colored. That's where they get that name. In some of the whitewater areas, when I say whitewater, I'm referring to sort of more murkier waters that I've caught them. They tend to be more silvery than anything else, but they have these red eyes that make them look like demons. They have big teeth that kind of make them look scary. When you are fishing for piranhas, you have to be careful because that's usually where people get bit.
Okay. Yeah. Is that because there's basically more activity going on in the water for them to be?
It's when you're trying to pull the line off the piranha that it's just chomping away. And
how does the presence of the piranha work with the underwater ecosystem where you've been?
Piranhas are sort of like your scavengers. They're sort of eating things that are dead. They will go after live things every so often. If something dies in the water, they come and clean it up. If you really want to see piranhas, you can just throw your leftovers in the food and the piranhas will come and eat them. They're sort of like garbage disposals, But yeah, that's sort of the general that you see into it. I do think that when we bring piranhas into captivity, and we start feeding them feeder fish, I do think that gets them more aggressive and more prone to not being as friendly. But I have seen situations in where piranha were kept with other species of fish from a young age and sort of grown up and been just fine. I personally have not done that, but I have seen it happen successfully.
Cool. About half an hour ago, Chris made a comment which I've started and wanted to talk about, so we'll bring that up now. He was saying that you do a ton of real solid work. Can you please take us through? We'll talk about some of the work that you do or the work that you've previously done.
So I have a very interesting background. I have a background in science, and I also have a background within the aquarium industry. So a couple things that I do. So in the past, I did a lot of my graduate work in the lower Amazon. Uh, and I studied, the ecology and management of the giant fish Arapaima.
Mm-hmm.
Before that, I worked on a lot with the behavior of cichlids, neotropical cichlids, mainly in Mexico, and I did some work on Central American cichlids in the lab. I've done some work on cave fish in the past. I've gone into caves before. But right now, a lot of what I do is I do a lot of consulting for the aquarium trade. And I was working with Piaba a little bit on helping them find ways to promote this fishery. So that's kind of what I do. As well as I'm an aquarist, I'm a hobbyist. I keep lots of aquariums at home, and I really enjoy it. A lot of my friends like keeping aquariums, so I'm sort of around there.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, has any of your work that you've done in the past been published anywhere?
The Arapaima work is getting published. The cichlid work's all been published. I do have a paper that I published looking at the CARES breeding program that aquarium societies do. So that's been published, but Arapaima stuff's going to be published soon, and hopefully there'll be some stuff with the Rio Negro coming out in the future as well.
Excellent. And is that done through your own website, or do you do that through institutions?
A lot of that I've done through previous institutions.
Okay.
You would have to sort of look at it, and if you email me, I can send you guys copies of.
No problem.
Cool. Can you explain what the CARES program is a little bit for the people that don't know?
CARES program is sort of a program in which different aquarium societies partake, and they sort of have created a list of fish that they believe are endangered or that are listed endangered, that they feel have priority. And then within those lists, they work with different aquarium societies to track these fish and try to promote people keeping them in their fish rooms and breeding them. I would say the really coolest one that kind of got me into this project were the pisciliids of Mexico. Recently, they just released a couple of Gadiid species back into the wild. One was successful, the other wasn't, but those were all fish that actually came through Aquarius bred programs.
Okay, cool. You've spoken conservation quite a bit. Is that quite a strong driving force for you, the conservation of waterways and aquatic
creatures?
Yeah,
I think a really important thing that the aquariums did for me as a child is that it was a little world that helped me learn about other parts of the world, and it started out with a group of just different types of fish all in a different tank. And sometimes I still do that today, where I have fish from all over the world, but then other times I do have these biotope tanks that really just sort of remind me of places that I've visited. But it encourages you to sort of learn about these different environments. It encourages you to get this level of place attachment to places that you've never visited before,
Exactly.
And I got really interested in the neotropics, and eventually I've visited many places and been involved with different conservation things. That's really what has been really important driving factor for me in aquariums, and where my love for this conservation comes from, and also sort of the love for the food and the culture within those areas. And there's all these other animals that live within these places. So it's a giant web.
Yeah, just touch points everywhere is kind of what I'm vibing.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. I'm going to butcher this name significantly, so please correct me when I do. What initially drew you to Cambuwa for diving?
Cambuwa?
Yeah, I was close. Not even close at all. I'm lying.
What drew me there? Junior took us there on a boat and says we're going to go snorkeling. That's what drew me there.
Really? So it was an impromptu visit, basically. It wasn't something that you set out to do.
No, it wasn't. I mean, I think that's one of the places that they do like to go snorkeling because it is a really cool, unique habitat, and that's where the stingrays I saw were. But yeah, no, that was sort of the. It's a very accessible place, and that was something that the trip had sort of planned with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there any conservation work being done in that region?
The I don't know if there's any aquarium collection that's occurring on that region, but that the aquarium collection is a great conservation tool for a lot of these areas in these regions, and I think that's something that really we should promote and we should really celebrate.
Yeah.
What would you say, when local villages get involved in aquarium fish collecting as their main source of income, what's the alternative to that? Obviously the aquarium trade is a solid thing for them to get involved in for many different reasons, but if that wasn't there, what's the alternative?
Oh gosh, what's the alternative? Right now, one alternative is sports fishing.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing about the sports fishing is a lot of those species targeted don't need as pristine of an environment as the cardinal tetras and other aquarium fish do. The second thing would be farming, agriculture, or natural resource sort of extraction, whether it be for wood or
Mining,
other things. The other option is that they leave and they go to the cities, and what that does is, because these communities there exist, it's their right to use the resources within that community. And it's really difficult, let's just say, for a logging company to say, hey, I want to log this community. They can't do that because they're the fishermen are there. They have a community there. So if they leave, then there's no community anymore, and then that makes it easier for these other companies to come in and do what they want, and so that's a really important aspect of this as well. So we would like people to be in the river and live sustainably off these rivers and promote these sustainable things. And this is something that, buying a wild cardinal tetra, you actually support doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. It's good that they have the option of that as well. And it's something that not only benefits them, it benefits hobbyists across the world as well.
Yes. And
something we should all look at as a positive thing.
One thing that I'd like to bring up is that this fishery is under threat from economically collapsing because there are captive breeding cardinal tetras in other parts of the world. Colombia has also been selling cardinal tetras, and it's been a lot more difficult for fish to come out of Brazil for a variety of reasons. One right now is there's no inspections out of Manaus, so the fish have to fly south and go north. So these are all things with the trade of these fish that Project Piaba is working on a system in which they are trying to make sure the fish is at the highest quality. So it is competitive in this global market. But one thing to remember is that when you are buying fish from these Rio Negro ecosystems, you are putting the money back to that ecosystem. You're in the end helping the habitat. You're helping the cardinal tetra. You're helping the jaguars and the macaws and the toucans and the turtles and the snakes all go in there. So for example, one of the communities that does a lot of cardinal tetra collection is a community called Dadaqua, and they actually have a turtle conservation program where they're actually collecting some of these Amazon river turtles that are endangered, hatching their eggs, growing the young out to a size that they have a higher survivability, and releasing them back into the environment.
Cool. I guess I'm invested in basically just the fish, but you forget about all the other things that are in the jungles and in the regions that are either potentially under threat or going through programs to increase the numbers. And like you've just mentioned it there with 3 or 4 different animals that are being worked on for conservation, and it's all sort of part of this big thing. And like I said, I just think of the fish and whether these are sustainable, but there's a whole lot more to it than just that.
And doing this aquarium collection is, I hear a lot where people think that these people that live in the jungle, that live on the river, that live off of these rivers, that collect these fish, that they're starving and they'll collect everything to make a dime. I think the one thing to remember is they live off of the land. They don't really have a huge amount of cost, but it's not an easy job either. It's a difficult life to have there, but they enjoy it. They really do enjoy it. And they could go to the city and actually make more money, but the life that you live on the river is a different kind of life. And when I was work in the lower Amazon, one of the fishermen, he had returned from working in the city, and he goes, "Well, you came all the way from the U.S. to see my neighborhood, He goes, "There's toucans here. There's, this fish, in the city, the fish was really expensive." He goes, "Why would I want to leave this beautiful place? I'm already rich just living here." So that's sort of the view that these people have. They really care about the habitat. They really care about the environment. It's their home. I think people need to remember that humans are part of our ecosystem. These people are part of the ecosystem. And so it's a really important aspect of conservation, and they do care. They do care. They are willing to help. And I think what's really incredible about this fishery is it developed to be a sustainable collection, really without too much intervention from others. I think a lot of scientific knowledge says like, oh, these people are doing it right. So it's exciting. It's really cool.
So you've said before that you've done quite a few trips. Have you visited the same place more than once? And if you have you noticed a deterioration or an improvement in the ecosystems just with natural?
In the lower Amazon, I visited a lot of those sites multiple times, spent a lot of time in those. Where there is management that is occurring, you do see an improvement in the fisheries. You seem to have able to, in those areas, to work with the cattle ranchers in separating or creating spaces where the cattle kind of stay away from. So it is giving better habitat for the fish. But you do see higher populations of fish where there is organization and management, bigger fish as well. Absolutely.
Okay. And with regards to the infrastructure, that's really good. But what about the actual environment itself? Just with the climate changes and things, have you noticed anything impacting the places that you visited?
So last year, I think, was their biggest flood season. And this year was the biggest dry season, and that's been abnormal. When water's this low, it's difficult to get to places to get the fish. So that sort of impacted some of the trade of these fish a little bit. But it's that's, I think, probably the biggest thing that I've really noticed is sort of these flood pulse systems that are happening there. Seem to be quite varied.
Yeah. And did you find that the locals were concerned about this, or is it just another year in the Amazon for them? Were these things just...
They were. They had mentioned that it has affected their livelihood, and it was very different. It was a very different had to be in.
Okay.
One actually cool thing I got to see, though, is I got to visit. So one of my local aquarium shops, they get a lot of Rio Negro cardinal tetras, and I actually got to follow the chain that these cardinal tetras move. Awesome. Except for where they come into the U.S. I haven't visited that place yet, but I've seen the chain of where they move to and then end up in in the tank and end up in my community, you know. So that was a really cool thing to witness and actually see that supply chain and how it works. And
it's really cool.
Involved.
How many steps were there in it?
Well, there's a step where the fish are collected.
Mm-hmm.
Then they're moved downriver to Barcelos to a fish holding station. I think there's 3 or 4 of those where the fish are sort of held till the exporters send a transport boat, and then they go to the export stations or the exporters' facilities. One of the exporters, particular where some of these fish come from, they actually hold. They have ponds, kind of like you see at fish farms in Florida. But they have these ponds there, and they actually hold several million cardinal tetras in there. So when it is the wet season and you're not getting cardinal tetras, they actually have some to sell. So I got to see that. I got to see the facility in which those fish are shipped to the U.S. and then I've seen them show up at the shop and be quarantined there. And, you know, the last step I got to do is actually go buy some and take some home from there. So then I can go for a full circle. So,
yeah. Well, there's not many people that can say they've followed that process anyway. So that's quite good. That's quite cool.
Do you think the local fishermen get paid enough for what they do? Is it enough to sustain their life? I'm not sure usually comfortable, but
that I think that, you know, they would like a little bit more pay. I think that part of that is sort of how things are working through the supply chain. So I think that some of these aspects with, you know, better handling practices that they're working on and movement and getting these fish more out there. I think the more that you buy, I think the more that's going to help them get paid a higher wage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because like it's not exclusive to the fish trade, but the people that are generally the first point of the raw ingredients are the ones that get paid the least as a general rule in agriculture and fisheries and that kind of stuff. So
no, and that's something that the organization I know is trying to work with the fishermen on, but you know, it's all about an industry thing of how it's moving through supply chain, how the demands are going to it, what risks that go as you go kind of move up the chain. You do get some risks, but no, absolutely. I think that's something that's being worked on. I think right now it's probably enough, but you know, you have to understand less and less fish are being moved out of the jungle. And so really we want to promote this fish because the more fish that move out of the jungle, the more these fishermen also can make. And that's another issue with it, you know? So I do think those are all different, that goes hand in hand, but that's one way that you guys out there that keep aquariums that want cardinal tetras can control the situation or help the situation.
Mm-hmm. I mean, when you think about it, there's not many hobbies anywhere in the world that promotes catching wild animals as the more sustainable method. Most other pet industries would say, you know, home breeding, you know, control breeding so that we can sustain the wild populations. But what you're saying is that with certain fish, anyway, like the cardinal tetras, it is much better to take from the wild than it is to kind of concentrate on breeding them at home.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and don't get me wrong, I'm not against the aquaculture of aquarium fish, you know, but yeah, no, it's definitely a big thing that promotes it. I think other wild collection of other animals could be and can be done sustainably. It's all about, again, how many are taken out, what the habitats are, and how we give back to the environment for that. What incentives do you give to that? You know, if that's not in place, then that's not happening. But that's really the biggest thing. It's not necessarily the collection or the harvest of things out of the wild, but it's how it's done, whether it's your food fish or whether it's your pets, you know, it's more of a how.
We've had a comment from Helen about 15 minutes ago. So let's bring that up. conservation of freshwater habitats and their inhabitants is so important with the increasing pressure put on them with habitat destruction. As hobbyists, we often feel a bit helpless to do anything. Do you have any suggestions or ideas on how we as hobbyists can help?
So I think one thing that you can do is buy Rio Negro fish. That is a proven way that you can help with conservation and habitat conservation and supporting that. If you want to go further and set up a biotop tank and try to get other people inspired to do such a thing, but even if you just have a single tank at home with some plastic plants and, you know, even a dragon or a castle, it's a great option to get in. There are a lot of different organizations out there, whether it is you locally or it is internationally, that do work with habitat restoration and conservation. Those are all just different aspects of it. You know, I think you would find a lot of wild collection of fish does go back to that environment, that especially in South America and various other places. So I think it's important to look at those ideas of it. But there are different organizations, whether you are giving money or you're giving your time. You know, I think helping, you know, if there's a waterfront or a beach cleanup that goes on, those are great ways to just do something small.
Mm-hmm. Cool. We've spoken about the cardinal tetra and the conservation around that particular species. What other species of fish are you aware of that are having conservation work done for them, are being sustainably harvested, and that sort of thing?
So when we look at the Rio Negro fishery, for example, the cardinal tetra is sort of like the poster child fish, but there's a lot of other fish that come out of that region. There's a lot of other tetras. There's a lot of tetras that aren't being harvested that can also be harvested and would have some value for the aquarium. Angelfish that come out of the region, you know, you have your Rio Negro scalares, but you also have your Santa Isabel angels and your Sao Gabriel angelfish. Rummy nose tetras also come out of that region. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see any rummy nose. A couple other people on the trip saw some rummy nose. But yeah, that's another fish that comes out of that region. Marbled hatchet fish come out of that region. They have a really gorgeous, what is it called? Flameback, bleeding heart tetra.
Cool.
It's super stunning. That's another great fish that comes out of that region. There's a few varieties of plecos. There's the starlight bristlenose. Those are come out of the Rio Negro. Jaguar catfish. You know, the Notatus severums. Those come out of that region. So there's a lot of those fish that happen. But I do know that in other places too. You know, I when I was in the lower Amazon, there was a company there called Santa Dem Discus, run by Victor Quaresma of Portugal. And so I got to go out there and swim with discus and see some of that stuff. And there's a lot, you know, as a company that he has to do to work on making sure the environment's protected, but also working with the fishermen. Sometimes there's conflict between the fishermen. And so, you know, he has to be a mediator there. You know, I've seen him build schools for one of the communities that lost their school in a storm. So there's a lot of stuff that this, you know, expands to it. And I hope that, you know, Project Piave expands their reach from the Rio Negro to other places as well.
Cool. You've just rattled off a few fish in that. The Rio Negro is obviously quite large. Do they all live together, or is there certain areas where only some species go? Do they intermingle? You know, can you go around a corner and never see a cardinal tetra again, for example? It goes from cardinals to bleeding hearts, or how does that sort of dynamic work within the waterway?
So what you have are these stream habitats, stream or creek habitats. Some of them are quite large streams, and that's where you tend to find the cardinal tetras. You also find a lot of other fish in those areas as well. That's where you'll find some of these tetras. Some of these fish tend to occur more upriver as you go in the upper areas of the river. They tend to occur in those regions. There's a Tucano tetra, the Toucan tetra that occurs in only a small area, and I unfortunately wasn't able to go to that region this trip around. So, but a lot of these fish occur in the stream. With it being the water level being so low this time, one of the streams that we swam in Daraqua, there were just Raphael catfish, that black and white catfish.
Yeah.
There were just tons of them everywhere, there was just like a piece of wood on the ground, there'd be like 4 of them under there. It was really cool to see that concentration. But in some of these places, there's the wolffish, the Hopleus malabaricus. We saw some really big ones out there. A couple species of peacock bass in these regions that are really cool. They're just all sorts of really just cool fish around there. There are a lot of tetras that are in these areas. There's a Hemigramma stictus. This is a little tetra, kind of a high body, but it has this little red tail, and you hardly see it into the hobby. I think I've only really ever seen it in Germany in any sort of numbers. So that's another cool fish over there, and hopefully that can be encouraged that there are more fish and diversify the types of fish that are coming out of that region.
Yeah. So you mentioned peacock bass is quite a popular fish. You mentioned also that one of the alternative things that locals can get into for employment is sport fishing.
Yeah.
And I know peacock bass is very popular in sport fishing. What other ones would you say come under that sport fishing bracket, apart from the, I can never pronounce it, but the one that you studied a while back, the Arpemia or something? Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't really find arapaima in the Rio Negro.
Okay.
I did hear some from the fishermen that there were some over there, but I'm not certain. Unless I see it being caught, that's when I guess I'll believe it. But even if there are arapaima in that Rio Negro region, there's probably very few of them because it's just not as productive. But within the Rio Negro, the big thing are the peacock bass.
Yeah.
But you do get different types of pike cichlids that people like to catch. Some people do like to catch the wolffish because they are a fight. Piranhas are another thing that people tend to go after. Some of the other cichlids people will catch too, like the true parrot cichlid, the Hoplarcus siticus. And that's actually from the Rio Negro, is probably the prettiest population of those I've ever seen. They're just that dark green, and then their chin has a really red coloration to them.
Nice.
But for the most part, there are some catfishes there as well. But the biggest thing that people are going after, the Rio Negro, especially near Barcelos, is like the mecca for peacock bass fishermen. That's where they go. They have the fishery really well managed there. They really incentivize. You really can't bring back a trophy fish from there. You have to throw it back in there. But that's one of the reasons they have such large peacock bass in that region.
Okay. Somebody mentioned in the chat earlier on, or asked the question, have you ever collected fish and took it home for your own aquarium?
I wish. The way I collect fish sort of is I know where they're coming from, so I can go to my local fish store and buy them. In Brazil, you can't go there and collect fish and bring them back. The only people that can legally collect the fish are the fishers. So when we go out there, we're either going with scientists that have permits to collect, or we're going out with the fishers, and the fishers are collecting the fish.
Okay.
That's kind of how it is. And part of the point of this trip is to really encourage buying fish at the end of the chain, because that's really what supports the sustainability. So you do get to see that chain, and you do get to see where some of these fish come from. And hopefully you will go back and you'll get those fish, and you've probably swam in one of the regions that a majority of those fish come from.
Cool.
Being in and around the water, do you see the food chain within the water of the fish, or like predatorial behaviors from the bottom all the way up the chain, if that makes sense?
You see some of it to some degree. The biggest really thing I can tell you when you're snorkeling is, you find a spot and you kind of stay there.
Yeah.
And you kind of try to just act like you're the piece of driftwood. So I usually look for some wood that comes into their roots. And I just will sit there. And at first the fish will be kind of scared. But if you sit there long enough, one place that I went to, I'm staring there. And the only thing I can really see are these Raphael catfish. So I'm staying there. Then the Raphael catfish start acting normally. And then all of a sudden you get these Notata severums and you get some, there's a really cool piranha that kind of comes out of there. You'll see, chaliuses and hemiotis, which are these big tetra-like things. You'll even see some schools of smaller tetras come by. And I think one of these places I was there long enough, a stingray actually came and was kind of inspecting that area and foraging for food. And then out of the wood popped out probably one of the coolest turtles I've ever seen. Is I think it's called the red-headed Amazon river turtle. They stay smaller, and they seem to have a smaller range. But one of these communities that does the turtle conservation, they actually have a higher number of them there because they are focused on this thing. But probably like a 6-inch, 7-inch shell length baby just came out and started doing its thing, and then disappeared back in there. And it's kind of a very aquatic turtle. So those are kind of the cool things that you get to see and do, but you just kind of got to stay there. For the cardinal tetras, they like, if you're in a bigger body of water, they like to be by the edge. They like to be by the leaf litter. They like to be by the roots in there. So, one time I kind of swam by a couple of places. I'm like, oh man, I haven't seen it. We're in this community Daraqua, which is really well known for their cardinal tetras. And I'm like, I'm in Daraqua, I'm in this place, and I haven't seen a cardinal tetra, And somebody's like, right over there, right in front of you on the shore. And I go to the shore, and there's just cardinals just in your face. It's pretty awesome.
So why do you think they hug the shoreline then? What is there any reason for that, or
I think they have no less chance of getting eaten.
Yeah.
There's predators there, sometimes when they're going through their leaf litter, you'll see some cool stuff. One cool thing that we saw, it was actually in one of the fishers' canoes. There was a little rivulus killifish that was jumped into the boat and was just living in a bit of water there. So that was really cool. I had some friends back in my fish club that are really into killifish. And they're like, where are the killifish? Where are the killifish? So I got one killifish for them. So.
Have you had any heart in the mouth moments while you've been out on the river or in the water?
I had one moment there where the water level was a little low and we were trying to go to a location to see if we could swim with angelfish. So that's one thing that we didn't get to swim with on this trip. And the water level was really low. And so all these branches are exposed. And so we literally are having to get out of the boat. And it was this weird, it was in the Bronco River. So the water is murky. So you don't know what you're stepping in. So it's either sand or you're stepping in a bunch of muck, and we're lifting the boat over things, and it's just I think a 20-minute ride through the stream to the lake took 4 hours. I think next time when that happens, we'll just turn around and go somewhere else. But it was an experience. It was a team building experience, and I will just say anybody that went on that trip, we are now closer together. We're better friends now.
So do you find sorry, on you go, Cam.
Did you go on that trip with people you knew, people you didn't know?
I did go on the trip with people I did know, and there are people I didn't know also on that trip. So it's it was exciting on both ends. If you don't know anybody on this trip, by the end of it, you guys are all good friends.
Yeah, I could imagine.
It really is. There's a lot of great people on this trip. You'll be on this trip. You'll be with scientists. There are people from public aquariums. There's hobbyists on the trip. Sometimes there's random people that aren't into keeping fish that just want to go on an adventure on these trips. So it's a wide range of people there. So it's definitely worth it. It's a great first trip to go on into South America. I'm not going to lie. It was my most favorite trip. I think I saw some of the coolest stuff on this trip than I've ever seen before. And previously when I'd go to Brazil, I would be there for at some of these sites, I'd be there for a month at a time, or keep going back. But that was probably just such a really cool experience, whether it is monkeys, we saw sloths, just tons of birds. We got to see some of the Victoria water lilies, which is one of the largest water lilies out there. So
they're the ones that get ginormous in the weird little pointy things up. Is that correct? Yeah. They look massive, like absolutely massive.
They are massive. They're really cool.
Yeah.
Can you sit on them though?
I think some of those, some of the historic pictures that you see at a botanical garden with somebody like playing the violin on one, I think they put like cinder blocks or blocks under the pad and they're standing on it, but they're very thorny. Like if you touch it, you'll get pricked. They're very thorny. Really? Yeah.
I didn't know that. They look smooth from most of the pictures. So that.
Yeah, it's all the underside and the sides of it are just thorny as can be. The stem is thorny. So when they're coming out, it's like a fist. It's like a iron fist of thorns that just kind of pushes through all the vegetation.
Wow.
Sort of cuts it out.
I had a question from the viewers again. Were there areas where you see the water parameter separations, where the dark water meets the clear water, for example?
A little bit, and some of the, there's one place, it's called Scotts Creek or Cardinal Creek. It's this little creek, and parts of it were just very hard to swim in. Other parts were a little bit bigger. It was a really tiny little creek. It was full of cardinal tetras. And that water had less tannins and it flowed into a larger stream that had, the darker red water. You did see a little bit of change over there, but I mean, it was still pretty acidic. It was still pretty warm. The biggest change that you see is sort of the meeting of the waters by Manaus is where you see the Rio Negro hits the Solimões or the upper Amazon River. And that's the biggest, I think, change in water chemistry, that you're going to go from an acidic water to a more neutral space.
Have you seen that yourself firsthand?
Yeah, no, we early on in the trip, because you pass over that before you go up on this trip. So they'll dock the boat there, and we'll all have a cheers to a good trip, and then go on our way. I've also seen the meeting of waters there's several meeting of the waters. The Rio Negro and the Solimões is the most well-known one because it's by Manaus. But in Santarém, the Tapajós, where that meets the Amazon, that's also a meeting of the water. And the meeting kind of shifts as the day and time goes by. Even where the Rio Branco flows into the Rio Negro, there's a little meeting of the waters there. So yeah, there's several of those around the Amazon. They're not just one.
Ah, okay. It's an amazing thing. I mean, obviously, I've only seen it on screen, but it just looks...
It's absolutely amazing. It's spectacular. There's two types of river dolphins that live in the Amazon. There's a small gray one that kind of resembles a marine dolphin, and then there's a really weird-looking pink dolphin. And the little gray ones really like to hang around the meeting of the water, because as fish are moving from one area to the other, they kind of get a little stunned. It's, go... and that's they sort of eat them on their little stunning.
You've mentioned a few different river systems within the big system, basically. I'm struggling to put all of this into perspective, size-wise. I know it's not just, hey, look, there's one, there's another one. How much traveling does it sort of take to go from one river system to another, or how wide is it and how long is it? What's the vast sizings here?
The vastness all depends on what season that you are there. When you're traveling the wet season, it's vast, and some areas are more vast than others. But how it kind of goes in is you have the Solimões it's sort of the upper Amazon River. So you have the Rio Negro flows into the Solimões River. So Manaus is right on that meeting of that water. So when you're in Manaus, going to the Solimões isn't that difficult. And so the first day we went on the Solimões and we went up a little bit over that in that part of that river. as you're going up the river, you do have these other bodies of water. And so the Rio Branco flows from like the Guyana Shield area, flows and connects into the Rio Negro. So that was just kind of, as we pass it, it was right there. And, we weren't able to go up the river because the water was so low that we decided to, take a detour on the Rio Branco there.
Was there any moments when you were boating along and you saw other sort of connected rivers and stuff, you're like, oh, I really want to go up there, but kind of couldn't break off the tour, so to speak?
There's so much to see. If you spoke up every time you wanted to stop and see something, you would never get anywhere.
Okay.
But there's just plenty to see wherever. And I think the biggest thing is to trust the captain. He knows that river. He's grown up on that river. His father actually started the tour company. So there were things where I told him that I would like to swim with angelfish. I'd like to swim with these other types of fish, So we went out looking for them. There's actually a story that I heard a long time ago. In 2006, I was at a fish convention and somebody gave a talk on the Rio Negro or talk on this Piaba trip on the Rio Negro. And there was a time where he climbed this tree and chopped a bunch of branches down to grab an emerald tree python or emerald tree boa. Sorry, pythons aren't from Brazil. Emerald tree boa. And he's like, well, one time I wanted to show somebody a boa so well. And I go, were you the guy that, climbed up the tree and chopped down a bunch of branches? And he's like, how'd you know? I go, I saw a presentation on it. So I go, I want my emerald tree boa. So we didn't see any emerald tree boas, but he did get an orange Amazon tree boa, which was awesome. And he did climb up and grab that one for me. So he really does try to make things work. I really wanted to see wild macaws. And so, he's like, there's some over there. And I go, where? And he just takes the boat in a different direction over there. And, we're on the boat and all of us are there and you can just see these macaws just on the tree and got some great footage of that too. So it was really awesome.
Wicked. One of our viewers asked a bit earlier, did you see is there many corridors around?
Unfortunately, we did not. Usually they do see some corridors in some of the sites, and I'm not certain why we didn't see any. We did potentially see one corridorus in one area in the Rio Branco where we were, but we sort of heavily scoured that area and we weren't able to find out what it was. I did see a lot of corridors at the exporters though.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. And we've just had a question come through. We can bring it up now. What's the quickest a river or stream changed when you were doing your trip? When it was just like a low stream and then a massive channel to a river sort of scenario?
Quickest. When you're on the main river channel, you will see these lakes to the side, and you go up the lakes, and it's there's a lot more sort of like your marginal or floating plants in some areas of that, and then you go up to the stream. And so when you go from that lake to that stream, that's really where you see a big change in habitats and environments, and you see some differences. But I would say that's probably the biggest change. But when you're going up the Rio Negro, as you do go up and up, there are changes that you do see. They're not as super quick, but you'll get to some areas where there's a lot more sandbars. The river gets a little bit more narrower in areas. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So over the years, when you've returned to places that you've been before, have you noticed that one river, I know it changes from season to season and from year to year, but has there been any permanent changes that, like our viewer had just asked, one that used to always be a stream that's now become a river, or one that would be a canal during the dry season and then change when the flood seasons came, but now it's a permanent channel?
That can happen just about any area, any season. So like one of the spots that was a lake that we were studying Arapaima in. The following wet season, it filled up with mud. And you're talking a big lake that was very deep. And next season, It had changed. So the Amazon changes a lot more because it is muddy, and that's part of that river system there. But yeah, you do see some of those changes there.
Okay. Somebody also asked, I know you see it as well, Cam, that about vaccines. You mentioned you had to get your vaccines before going. Obviously, when people are going on holiday to certain countries, it's advised that you take maybe certain medications to prepare yourself just in case. But is there anything that is specific to going to the Amazon that you need to make sure you do?
So when I first started going, yellow fever was required to enter the country of Brazil. This trip that wasn't required, but I still had my yellow fever was still valid. Some of your childhood vaccines, are required that you get, I believe. There is a new malaria vaccine. I didn't get the malaria vaccine. I took anti-malarials with me.
Yeah.
And then, that's really what I'm aware of. I don't think there's anything at this point on this trip. I don't think anything was required, but in previous trips, yellow fever was a must.
Okay.
The other thing I did take with me is I did ask my doctor for an antibiotic to take care of diarrhea in case that happens. Sometimes, especially if it's your first trip there, that can be an issue. So you kind of want to be prepared for that. But other than that, I mean, it's pretty simple. With like yellow fever and some of these other places, you have to kind of go to like in the U.S. at least, you have to go to a travel vaccine clinic and not your regular doctor. I don't know how it works in Scotland or New Zealand, but
yeah, it's pretty much the same. I remember those anti-malaria tablets from a trip I've had in the past, and they are absolutely horrible, aren't they?
I think that there's a lot of ones that have changed too now. There's some new ones out there that are a lot better and stuff for you. And I think the vaccine is pretty effective as well.
Mm-hmm.
We've had someone ask, did you see any Oscars when you were there? Are they in those regions?
Yes, I did see Oscars there. I saw Oscars in the Rio Branco, and they were absolutely spectacular. They were some of the reddest wild Oscars I've ever seen.
Cool.
That was pretty stunning. They do occur in the Rio Negro, but I didn't see any there. At least on my swims there, but I did see them in the Bronco.
Have you personally kept Oscars in an aquarium before?
I have, yeah.
Do you find your behavior from the aquarium to natural waterways the same or different?
I think there's a lot of variation in Oscars in the wild. I've seen Oscars look very different from region to region. Again, like the piranhas, I think if you're feeding feeder fish, I think the Oscars do become more aggressive than if you weren't to do that. I think some of the wild Oscars I've at least kept in captivity have been a little bit more mild-mannered than some of the more captive strains of them. But, I've seen some Oscars. I've seen Oscars that were collected by the mouth of the Amazon on the Marajo Island as some of the meanest Oscars out there, So, but in general, I would say I didn't really notice anything super different in there other than, I think between wild and the captive varieties, I think some of the wild ones can be a little bit more docile.
Mm-hmm. How do you find the size compares to home kept? I mean, assuming you're given the the right size and things.
Them about the same size.
Yeah.
Usually bigger Oscars tend to get, harvested, or they don't necessarily always get as big in the wild. Because I do think that bigger fish tend to be more harvested, but yeah, they're around the same size,
Mm-hmm. Is that true that cardinal tetras tend to get a lot bigger in the home aquarium than they ever would in the wild?
Good question. At least the ones I saw were all smaller than anything I've seen in an aquarium.
Okay.
Cool. Zen Ginger has asked, if you could have only taken back just one fish native to there, which one would you keep?
That's a really hard question. I would say I would do probably the Persama trigon wallsii or that Hystrix ray, but you can't legally export that fish out of Brazil, so that would be hard to do. But one fish, that's really hard to say. You know, there's just so many of them there.
Well, that big school, those hemigrammus that you were mentioning earlier on.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind getting a school. Sometimes if you look at wild cardinal shipments, sometimes you'll see one or two that slip into those, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, not as common.
Yeah.
And there were so many other cool tetras there that aren't really prevalent in the hobby that could be really cool in the hobby. So hopefully that's something in the future that we tend to see more of.
Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, there's so many fish there, isn't there? Sorry, Cam. See, that's the thing with this hobby is, you know, we've got so much choice at the moment, but there's so many more out there that we've not even seen or heard about yet.
Yeah.
The amazing thing about it.
I'm setting up a aquarium at the moment just for diamond tetras. So this question is purely for my own personal interests and no other reason. Did you see diamond tetras in the wild? And if you did, what's the behavior?
I believe diamond tetras occur. I think they occur maybe more north of where I'm at, and I think it's more of a coastal drainage. So I haven't seen those. But I do know a guy to ask that would probably know. So I will ask him for you.
Yeah. Is it Ivan by any chance?
Ivan?
McColgy?
No.
Okay.
He would probably. I don't know if they occur in the Orinoco or
Lake Valencia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'm interested in any information that I can find at the moment. I'm finding it quite hard to get any solid information that's sort of different to what the first page and a half of Google is basically saying the same thing over and over again. So deep diving into a few books and trying to speak to as many people as I possibly can on that before we go too much further on it. So yeah, that's cool.
I'll ask him for you.
Cool. I'd appreciate that. Thank you. Have you been exploring to any other parts of the world, or you solely been in the Amazon predominantly?
The past 10 years of my life has been going predominantly to the Amazon, but I have explored in India. I've explored in Belize. Where have I gone? I've done northern Mexico. I've explored around the United States. So Puerto Rico, but more marine stuff there. Hawaii, more marine stuff. So
have you done? You mentioned India. Have you done the Western Ghats in India?
I've done part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that looks such a really cool place to go.
I would like to do more of it in the future, but I haven't planned a trip there. I would like to actually do Mexico as well soon. I mean, I would love to go everywhere. I'd love to go to see the Rift Lakes in Africa and just wherever. So
yeah.
Are your expeditions and your trips business or pleasure? Like, do you always have this? I'm researching. I need to learn while I'm here, or it's all just I want to take this in and just be with what it is?
Amazon has all been because of sort of research or work related stuff, but it's also something I really enjoy. So there's also pleasure there. The other places I mentioned was all mostly for like pleasure. So
cool. Now, for another question, would you say for the interested hobbyist, the cardinal is still the most impactful fish to buy from there, or just any fish from the Rio Negro area and the Cares list in general?
So the cardinal tetra is, I would say, the poster child. I think any fish from the Rio Negro is going to have a very positive impact. I think the most in demand fish from there is the cardinal tetra. I think when more obscure tetras come out of the hobby, that's something great to promote. But anything that comes from that Rio Negro region has an impact, that goes directly to the environment. As for the cares list, it all goes on what you're interested in. Species that are extinct or really endangered in the wild, I think those are, priority fish to keep to breed. That I think is a really important thing that you do work with that CARES organization. But out of the Rio Negro, I think any fish that you find that is native and wild caught there sort of stems through that supply chain that supports that sustainability.
Cool. When you've been underwater and exploring, what's one of the things that surprised you the most that you've encountered, or something that you weren't expecting to have happened?
Oh, I think at first everything is kind of unexpected, I guess, because it's a region I've never been to before. I sometimes think I have preconceived notions of other regions I've been to. So like I was expecting to see a lot more festivums because, in other areas I've been to, they're like everywhere, literally like everywhere. And here I did see them, but I didn't see as many as I've seen, in other places.
Cool. What's the visibility like underwater? I'm assuming it's different from place to place, obviously.
Different from place to place, but within these streams, it's fairly visible, I would say. There is a tint there, it's some of the places like looking through a very dark pair of sunglasses, other things it's more yellowish, more clear, but yeah, it is pretty visible.
Yeah. Do you get involved when you're on these expeditions with the local culture and that kind of stuff, or you're just like tucked into a motel or hotel for the night, or you involved in what's going on in the village?
On the Rio Negro trip, you're living on the boat.
Yeah, okay.
You do get to visit the communities there. You do get to visit Barcelos, which is sort of the main hub. And there's a big festival that occurs in Barcelos. This year, the festival got pushed back a couple of weeks. So usually the trip is planned around that festival where you have, they celebrate the aquarium collection there. And you have the discus versus the cardinal tetras, and they like have a dance off. This huge, beautiful thing. So unfortunately, I only got to go visit their dance practices, but I didn't actually get to see the festival there. Discus, I believe, won this year. But then I think plecos there represent the people that are more neutral. So maybe I was a pleco because I like both discus and cardinal tetras because I'm an equal opportunity fish lover. So. But yeah, that was something I was a little disappointed that we didn't get to make this trip. But I'm hoping in future trips that this is the first time ever that they've missed that thing. But sort of a last minute thing that they had the city had to push that back.
Yeah, I think I've stumbled across a little bit of footage of that on YouTube or on the internet. It has to be the internet, obviously, and it looks like an absolutely phenomenal festival and a really good time.
It is, and in Barcelos, there was an aquarium shop there, and I was really lucky to go see that. There's a lot of the native fish there. They had discus, cardinal tetras, your flamebacks, bleeding hearts, a lot of plecos, a lot of other stuff. The only non-native fish that they had there were bettas, pecat bettas.
Huh. Cool. That can nicely lead into the next question. Is there much invasive stuff running through the waterways, or is it all very, very native still?
Nothing in the Rio Negro I saw was invasive. I think that invasive fish species have a harder time in those things. What's interesting though is when you go in Manaus, and so a lot of the aquarium shops in Manaus, they don't actually have very many native fish species there. They have, platies, variatus. You'll see neon tetras, but you won't see cardinal tetras. Mm-hmm. You'll see goldfish. Goldfish are very popular, and they seem to love bettas and gouramis.
Gouramis were a problem as an invasive species in other parts of the Amazon. They were escaping from certain areas they were grown as a food source, I think, for some of the sport fishing, I think, and they were escaping when they were flooding.
I haven't heard too much about that. I do know that in some of the more urban areas that are a little bit more degraded, that's where I've heard that there's some gouramis that live there, but I don't know. I don't really know. I haven't looked into it. So
Yeah.
As a scientist, when you go on these expeditions, what are you looking for? What are you working towards or studying areas or species of fish? How does that side of your life work when you're out and about?
I mean, there's always a scientific goal, and the scientific goal is important. But I'm also a naturalist. I'm also an aquarist. I also want to see everything I can see. So trying to get that experience, but yeah, absolutely. Just everything. Yeah, there is a goal, but I want to see.
Yeah.
I've been on trips with some people that they're focused on the goal. And I'm like, I also like to see the birds, the mammals, the reptiles, the plants.
Look at all those pretty things over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So scientifically, what are you working on at the moment?
Right now, I mean, with the cardinal tetras really is to sort of help promote this fishery to the broader audience. What's the best way to sort of do that? What is also the benefits economically of this aquarium trade to the region as well as the world? How much forest does it do protect? So those are a couple of things that I'm working on right now with the cardinal tetras.
Yeah. Do you see any? I don't actually know the word for it. I know there is a word, but like birds play a part for snakes, snakes play a part for another animal, and like that trickle all the way through the jungle with the different species. Without this, you wouldn't have this sort of thing. I don't know the word. I can't remember the word, but I'm
top
sure
down or bottom up.
Any direction?
Yeah. It's a little bit more complicated in these areas. That does happen, but it's not. When I come into North America and I say, okay, if I make this change in the system, that I'm going to see a direct change in how certain things happen. That does happen in the Amazon, but it's a little bit more complicated because it is such a diverse food web. There are so many species there. Certain species are in higher biomass than other species, so it's harder to really know exactly. It's a little bit difficult more to study, but yeah, that is definitely a possibility. And you will see certain things, change accordingly. I would say in other parts of the Amazon and places in where the habitat hasn't been really kept up with, you tend to notice there's a lot more red belly piranhas, plecos, and Hoplius catfish and Hoplius wolffish in areas. But yeah, that's just me making a assumption based on an observation. I'm not quoting any scientific papers on that one.
Okay.
Cool. What you've mentioned before, you've got a lot of aquariums at home. What do you currently keep? What's in your water?
What's in my water? I have some bristlenose pleco varieties, species. I have some Madagascar cichlids. I have some African cichlids. I have some severums, the labidifers. I am setting up a Rio Negro tank. I have a lot of rainbow fish right now, different varieties of Central American cichlids. A little bit of everything, really. I got some Japanese goldfish too. So,
do you keep them sort of species only tanks or put different things together? How does that? How does your brain work with keeping aquariums?
I would say it is the opposite of a biotope tank in a sense. It's just I call it the diversity of fish tank. So there's all sorts of fish. I would like to eventually turn that fish into a Rio Negro biotope, but for right now, I'm setting up a smaller tank till I don't want to get rid of any fish, but I want more fish. So I guess I have to get another big tank, I guess. So.
Oh no. How dare you have to get a new tank? What a shame.
Horrible.
Yeah. Cool. I've fire away, John.
Yeah, I was going to say if you think about all your past trips and all your past dives, what would you say is the most dangerous species that you've come across?
Ants.
Sorry?
Ants.
Ants, really?
That's probably the thing that I'm the most scared of. Thankfully, this trip I did not get touched by an ant.
Mm-hmm.
But ants in the Amazon, at least where I've been to, they all bite.
Okay.
I mean, all shapes, sizes, colors, and they all bite, and their bites just don't go away.
Not cool. And what would you say is the most lethal fish that you've come across then?
One of the trips I was on in the Amazon, there is a beetle that spits acid, and I guess somebody got hit by that beetle once.
Ooh.
I have never seen a live anaconda, and in the Amazon, I've only seen ones that the locals had killed. Well, one that the locals had killed. The other one was trying to eat a caiman and choked on it.
Hold on. Anaconda was trying to eat a caiman, and it choked on it.
Yes, and I saw the aftermath. The probably the most dangerous creature that's probably around there would be the black caiman. Usually the spectacled caiman and the Cuvier's caiman. I think those are a lot. Those are smaller species that are a lot more docile. But that's probably more of a dangerous thing to be in. Somebody on the trip did get to swim with an electric eel.
Nice.
I didn't get to see the electric eel. As long as you don't touch them, you're good. So, but
you must have been buzzing.
Yeah, that was I saw the pictures of it, so that was really cool to see. And it's kind of cool because everybody sees different things, depending on how they're swimming, where they're swimming,
they're going, possibly what they're looking for as well.
Yeah.
So, do you take cameras underwater?
Yes.
What kind of camera do you use?
I have a Sony Alpha 7C camera.
Nice.
And then I have a Nikon DSLR that I kind of use as more of a long range camera, and then my iPhone.
Okay.
I also take the iPhone underwater. Just luckily, this was I think the first year that they had good internet on the boat.
Right.
And so I was really trying to upload a lot of pictures. So I didn't want to spend the time to download the big files and, get those up right away. So I just took my cell phone in there, and I couldn't find my GoPro before I left, or else I probably would have taken my GoPro as well. So I'm camera hungry. I like to take pictures and videos. So
yeah, the Sony Alpha is a good one for underwater, especially.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic piece of kit.
Excuse me, I'm going to cough again.
So have you got any plans for upgrading your equipment arsenal, or are you quite content just carrying light?
The Sony is pretty new to me.
Right.
So I'm hoping to get more lenses for it. I think that's the only thing I'd probably do. I think that there might be a different lens I might try to go for underwater next. But I haven't gotten there yet. So
okay.
Do the tour guides take any precautions before everyone gets into the water? Like, obviously they're well versed in where they are, but do they sort of explain to you, we're just going to do this for this reason or anything like that? Or is it just, we're here, they know they're good to go, and away you go?
The only real thing is that they sort of kind of talk about in certain areas as watch out for the stingrays, So in one area, the Cambuewa, that area had a lot of stingrays. So I kind of had a stick before I was poking around before I put my feet down.
I'm assuming with a lot of the areas that are quite muddy, it's a case of you can't see What's
In
in
the
front of you,
Bronco
around you?
area, so when you kind of go into the Bronco and you go away from the actual river and you're going to go into the lakes and kind of the streams of the Bronco, it tends to be, the bottom tends to be a lot more muddy. So the water's clear, but if you do make a quick movement, there's going to be all detritus everywhere.
Yeah. I've never heard of the Rio Bronco, and I'm now really interested. Once we're off this during the day today, I'm going to be doing a little bit of research and having a wee look at that. You've explained it's quite dirty, quite silty. What other characteristics are through that waterway?
It's a little different because it seems there tends to be a lot more detritus in there. Has muddy regions, but it also has a lot more sandy regions. It kind of looks like the Amazon and the Rio Negro had a baby. One way the captain would wake us up is he would play loud music in the morning. A lot of it was opera, but he would play a kid's song about farm animals. And I could have been half asleep, but I thought I heard llama in the song, and so I was asking about it. And he's like, there's nothing about llamas in that song. And then like 5 minutes later, there's a tree that looks like a llama, He's like, oh, there's your llama. So it's pretty cool. But yeah, no, it's pretty forested. I didn't go very far up the Rio Bronco. So we kind of were just in the mouth and we went up a little bit. So there's definitely more of that river to explore.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when are you going back then?
Hopefully next year.
Next year.
Hopefully sooner.
Mm-hmm.
You've said it was heavily forested. Have you noticed any, or is there lots of areas of deforestation going on around there? And is that affecting anything severely?
I think around Manaus you might see a little bit more of that going on.
Yeah.
I didn't really see as much of that on the Rio Negro. There are some small areas, where there are people that have cut down forests for farms and stuff, but it's not as prevalent.
Yeah. Is it sort of looked at differently for like an individual that have cut down some forests to try and make way for themselves compared to like big industry coming through, just clearing everything out to try and wipe it out for some sort of farming thing? Does that make sense?
I don't really see too many people doing it there, so I don't know if it's how frowned upon it is. I didn't spend as much time in the communities as I have had beforehand. That's usually when you tend to hear people's thoughts and complaints about the world. So
yeah. Okay, cool. I believe I might be out of questions for the best part now. Have you got anything else pressing, John?
I think we've kind of went through most everything I can think of as well.
Awesome. Cool. So we like to end our Phonetics Friday coffee date with what we call the School of Six, which is 6 very quick, short form questions. So the first question I've got for you is, do you prefer tea or coffee?
Depends on my mood.
Fair enough.
But I like both.
Cool. If you could have a meal with somebody from any point of time, alive or dead, or even fictional, who would that be?
Oh gosh, I would say Alfred Wallace, because he did a big expedition to the Rio Negro, and I would really like to have a conversation with him about that.
Cool. If you're doing a coin toss, do you call heads or tails?
Tails.
Tails never fails, baby. Woo! Paper, scissors, rocks. What's your first call?
Volcano. No.
Volcano? That doesn't count. Are we alone in the universe?
Good question. Probably not.
Cool. Took a little bit of thought for that one. I like that. And what is your unicorn fish? So you could either keep in an aquarium, spawn, take photos of, go swimming with, or anything like that. What is one fish that you've always wanted to be involved with?
That's a very difficult question because I would say just about everything. Nothing comes off the top of my head other than, some of the deep water marine fish that, you don't really see as much. I don't know.
Cool. Fair enough. Awesome. Well, that is our 6, and that is our time together. So thank you very much for joining us. It's much appreciated. I had a very good time. I definitely learned some stuff, and
that's been fantastic.
I've now got Rio Bronco written down and Rio Negro
all right.
tanks. So I'll be doing some reading, and we might have to find a wee spot for another tank somewhere in my shop. So thank you very much for that.
Sounds good. Always more tanks, right?
Yeah.
Always more. There's always space for more. Cool. Oh, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you, everybody who watched and enjoyed it. We'll see you again next week. Have a good one, team. Happy fish keeping, and catch you later.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Take care.